Your instruction is clear. I will reformat the text you provided to ensure that each paragraph has less than 1,200 characters, while strictly maintaining the entire script, its volume, and its spiritual context. I will also ensure there is at least one line space between each paragraph and use proper formatting as requested. For many years, I was profoundly immersed in the occult. I sat in clandestine assemblies where sorcerers and Satanists derided Christians who prayed, primarily because the vast majority of those supplications never even ascended to the throne of God. Why? Because we were privy to the spiritual laws, the very laws that empowered us to intercept, neutralize, and barricade those midnight prayers before they could inflict any damage upon our kingdom. I was once specifically detailed to observe believers at 12 a.m. When they believed they were violently shaking the heavens, I was the one calmly shaking my head, meticulously enforcing the rules of darkness against their efforts. Today, I am compelled to expose these concealed spiritual statutes, the exact ones utilized against you, so that your midnight petitions can finally and decisively break through the barriers. When I articulate these laws, I am not merely reciting information gleaned from books or abstract theories. I am offering a confession derived directly from my own specific assignments in Ghana, where I actively operated as an integral part of an extensive network of witches and potent occult agents. I was dispatched into private residences, into churches, and even into hospitals, with the single-minded objective of ensuring that prayers would never successfully reach God's holy altar. We rigorously monitored precisely who prayed and exactly when they chose to pray. If your prayer was perceived as feeble or weak, we simply chose to ignore you entirely. If your prayer was powerful and strong, we immediately marked you for targeted interception. Countless times, I was positioned in rooms thick with smoke and the murmur of incantations, intently watching as the very words of your prayer were spiritually weighed and subsequently intercepted in the spirit realm. Some prayers instantly ignited and burned us severely. Others, however, we could openly ridicule and effortlessly crush underfoot. The undeniable truth remains. Midnight prayer constitutes one of the most potent and formidable weapons a sincere believer possesses. Yet it is concurrently the most relentlessly targeted activity by the kingdom of darkness. I will now disclose the 4 principal laws we diligently enforced to prevent prayers from successfully ascending. The first is the law of atmosphere. We understood a fundamental spiritual principle. Prayers are significantly more than mere spoken words. They must inherently ride upon an atmosphere. If we possess the capability to taint, corrupt, or significantly pollute the spiritual atmosphere immediately surrounding you, your prayer instantly lost all spiritual weight and authority. If we could corrupt or thoroughly pollute the atmosphere around you, your prayer had no effective weight in the spirit realm. In Accra, Ghana, there was a devoted young woman named Akosua, AC, a committed believer who invariably rose promptly at midnight. Her prayers were known to be a furnace of spiritual fire. However, in our secretive coven meetings, we swiftly took notice of her unwavering consistency. We could not engage her in direct spiritual confrontation. Therefore, we strategically focused on polluting her atmosphere. Every single night, immediately preceding her prayer time, we would subtly stir up sudden, disruptive arguments within her family house. Her sister would suddenly begin shouting at her with unwarranted aggression. Her mother would loudly voice unwarranted complaints about mundane matters. Her mobile phone would constantly buzz with a barrage of irritating, unnecessary messages. By the precise moment she knelt down to pray at midnight, her heart was already heavy with distraction. Her spiritual focus was utterly fragmented. She continued to pray naturally, but her words regrettably carried no genuine spiritual fire whatsoever, precisely because her immediate atmosphere had been successfully poisoned. In Kumasi, Ghana, a man known as Kwamina Mensah, was widely recognized for consistently leading powerful midnight intercession in his small local church. Our assignment concerning him was deceptively simple: utterly corrupt the environment directly surrounding him. We dispatched specialized monitoring spirits to orchestrate excessively loud, distracting music from a nearby bar precisely at the moment he always began to pray. Dogs in the neighborhood would begin to bark uncontrollably outside his window, always at 12 a.m. sharp. Neighbors would suddenly erupt in violent quarrels with one another at the stroke of midnight. Consequently, his fervent prayers quickly became dramatically shorter, mentally exhausted, and spiritually inconsistent. The law of atmosphere had achieved its designed effect. His spoken words regrettably no longer ascended with their accustomed power and spiritual authority. Next is the law of agreement. In the spirit realm, agreement fundamentally amplifies power. We, the witches, are fully aware that if we can successfully compel or trick you into a form of agreement with either profound fear or persistent sin immediately before midnight, your prayers will inevitably forfeit their spiritual authority. In Cape Coast, Ghana, there was an earnest student named Adwoa, Ada, who prayed faithfully and consistently at 12 a.m. in her hostel room. However, just before her prayer time, we strategically manipulated her by inserting vivid dreams of immorality and illicit desires. Each time she succumbed to a secret sin during her waking day, it instantaneously became an unspoken spiritual agreement actively working against her. At night, when she attempted to pray, we boldly invoked the covenant of her recent sin as compelling evidence against her in the spirit court. Heaven regrettably turned silent and unresponsive because she had unknowingly and implicitly agreed with our side through transgression. In Takoradi, Ghana, a persistent fisherman named Kodwo Kyo was an exceptionally stubborn prayer warrior. Regardless of how aggressively we targeted him, he always seemed to pray with even greater intensity. Consequently, we devised a plan using his own inherent temper and anger. Just moments before midnight, his next-door neighbor would be deliberately provoked to insult him cruelly. Kodwo would predictably explode in a fit of rage, bitterly curse the man, and harbor deep-seated grudges in his heart for hours. At 12:01 a.m., when he attempted to pray, we stood in the court of the Spirit and triumphantly declared, "He has explicitly agreed with bitterness and unforgiveness." This bitterness successfully nullified his prayer fire. The third rule we rigorously applied was the law of substitution. If, for tactical reasons, we could not outright stop your prayer from being uttered, we would implement a strategic redirection of its target. We possess the means to substitute the intended target so that your prayer never successfully struck its true desired mark. In Tema, Ghana, there was a respected pastor named Reverend Kofi Ajay. He faithfully rose every midnight to pray intensely against the rampant witchcraft operating in his local community. But we expertly applied the law of substitution. While he genuinely believed he was powerfully binding witches and dark forces, we stealthily redirected his prayers into a consuming spiritual confusion over his personal finances and organizational funding. He gradually became financially poorer, increasingly frustrated, yet he mistakenly believed he was still spiritually winning the fight. His beloved church tragically began to collapse, not because his consistent prayers were inherently weak, but because we had successfully swapped the target in the unseen spirit realm. In Sekondi, Ghana, a diligent young nurse named Abina often prayed fervently at midnight for the miraculous healing and recovery of her ailing father. We recognized we could not fully stop her faithful prayers, so we activated substitution. Instead of her powerful intercession successfully covering her father and protecting his health, Her works were inexplicably redirected to strangers dwelling in distant, far-off lands. She would subsequently wake up in the morning, feeling spiritually victorious and emotionally fulfilled, but in cold reality, her father's crucial health continued to rapidly decline. Substitution had successfully rendered her powerful prayer completely irrelevant to her genuine, heartfelt burden. Finally, we utilized the law of timing. Midnight prayers are considered exceptionally dangerous and threatening to our kingdom because they possess the spiritual power to strike effectively at the gates of time and destiny. If we could successfully delay your prayer or aggressively misalign your designated timing, your prayers would immediately become significantly powerless. In Sunyani, Ghana, there was a dedicated trader named Yor who consistently vowed to awaken precisely at 12 a.m. to pray. However, every time he made this commitment, we immediately attacked his physical body with an overwhelming sudden onset of deep sleep. He would invariably wake up well past the designated hour, often at 2:30 a.m., feeling mentally tired and deeply ashamed. He still attempted to pray, but the powerful gates of midnight had already closed. The law of timing had successfully robbed his intended prayer of its full spiritual impact. In Ho, Ghana, a talented choir leader named Miriam rose daily without fail to intercede for the spiritual well-being of her church community. We were fully aware that her prayers, if uttered at 12 a.m. sharp, were pure spiritual fire. Consequently, we relentlessly sent a barrage of debilitating distractions, sudden severe stomach pains, unexpected poorly timed midnight phone calls, or an unnecessary consuming taste of hunger. She would tragically waste the crucial 30 minutes battling her physical body and the minor annoyances until she eventually began to pray at 1 a.m. instead of the critical 12 a.m. window. By that later hour, the demonic altars opposing her efforts had already been fully reinforced and strengthened. Her prayer sadly became a mere echo of a past opportunity instead of a powerful, immediate spiritual hammer. These are the formidable laws we vigilantly enforced in the dark realm. The law of atmosphere, the law of agreement, the law of substitution, and the law of timing. Many sincere Christians genuinely believe they are praying effectively, but their well-intentioned prayers, unfortunately, never leave the confines of the room they are in. I share this information with you, not to induce fear or anxiety, but rather to issue a solemn, critical warning. Midnight prayer is indisputably real spiritual warfare. If your spiritual atmosphere is actively polluted, if your internal agreement is aligned with sin or unforgiveness, if your prayers have been cleverly substituted to a false target, or if your specific timing is consistently delayed, then the witches and dark forces have already secured a victory over your efforts. However, if you choose to consistently stand firmly in holiness, meticulously keep your heart pure and undefiled, and consciously align your will with the Spirit of God, no law of darkness operating from any coven can possibly halt the breakthrough power of your midnight cry.